Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion on Legendary Lord packs in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. A short while ago there were a series of discussions on Reddit with respect to Legendary Lord rankings, and people voted on this. Not race packs, just Legendary Lord pack rankings, from the best to the very worst. Now I don't really agree necessarily with what Reddit decided, but I thought it would be interesting to just go over what Reddit voted on and why they voted on certain things. And I'm going to start with Shadow Blade, which is going to go in 7th place. So it's C tier Lord pack for the game. Now personally I do think that this pack is worth it a lot more, but Reddit's motivation on this, or the post that won the most votes and why this ended up in 7th place, is because Malice Darkblade's campaign is not particularly great. I can agree with that, and a point people have made is that it feels like Malice's campaign should have really been Rakarth's campaign. You certainly can spawn an endgame army of beasts, you have certain benefits for that, and possibly Creative Assembly decided at the 11th hour to replace Rakarth with Malice Darkblade. I mean, they certainly got a very famous voice actor for Rakarth, so feels a bit weird. Makes more sense if you consider the campaign that could have been added for this as Rakarth's campaign as opposed to Malice Darkblade. And Snitch, well, Snitch, I consider him the best Skaven campaign, but I know that a lot of people don't hold that opinion, and that's certainly the perspective on Reddit as well. In last place, next up, Grim and the Grave, the worst DLC Lord pack in the game. Volkmar's campaign isn't great, Gorst's campaign isn't that great, and Gorst just really felt out of place. The reasoning why people voted this in last place is that Gorst was just kind of like a lieutenant of Manfred, and Creative Assembly wanted to go based on a particular storyline that happened in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, but because we already had Manfred and that story involved him, they decided to add Gorst, who is not really an important character in any way, shape, or form within the Warhammer universe. So it just ends up feeling off. Now, from my perspective, this DLC is worth it more. Like, I certainly do agree that Gorst's campaign and Volkmar's campaign don't feel great, but Archlectors are certainly worth using. Other things, less so, though this is the only DLC that's going to give you Regiment's Renown for the Vampire counts, so just my perspective on this, I'd certainly rank it higher in terms of value proposition, though the campaigns are certainly not worth it. Again, this is not necessarily my opinion, is the opinion of Reddit. The Hunter and the Beast. Hunter and the Beast is in 8th spot. So Nakai's campaign never worked quite well. Marcus's campaign never worked quite well. That's what quite a lot of people have been saying for a long time. In fact, both of those campaigns, especially Nakai, were quite freaking terrible in Warhammer 2. It is better now that the Empire has been reworked and Nakai is in his lovely little corner in Cathay, but yeah, this is easily one of the worst DLCs in the game. So I agree with Reddit. I would have actually ranked this lower than Reddit actually did. But yes, in 8th position, Hunter and the Beast. Then you have the King and the Warlord, which ended up in 9th place. Just doesn't feel like a great DLC. The campaigns aren't particularly great. The value proposition, like, it's just basically a unit pack more so than anything else. Like, the campaigns, not particularly exciting. The Lords themselves, they have their issues. And it's one of the first DLCs that Creative Assembly ever released for Warhammer 1, and it's certainly showing its age. You know, maybe if Skarsnik and Belegar were improved, it could be better, but yeah, people don't have a great opinion about this DLC. I would say it's worth picking up because you get Rune Lords for the Dwarves and you get Nasty Skulkers for the Greenskins, which are both very useful, but yes, I can certainly see why people wouldn't highly value this. Next up, Prophet and the Warlock in 5th place. Yes, even Reddit, even freaking Reddit agrees that Ikeclaw is not necessarily the greatest thing under the sun. So this is a rare situation where I agree with Reddit. Tenuen's campaign, not that great. Ikeclaw, the reason people voted this pack down actually though is they viewed it as Creative Assembly just forcing us to buy power to make a race workable, because there's only 2 units that are worth it, but we're talking Jezzails and Railing Gunner, so they're very, very powerful units. You do get the Lord choice, you get a bunch of Lizardmen stuff, it's the principal DLC for Regiment's Renown, But it was kind of really a shitty business practice that a lot of people did not like and still don't like. So that's the reason it got voted down. And also Lizardmen stuff is not really that exciting in general. Like virtually all Lizardmen DLCs, paid DLCs that we have, kind of got screwed over because other campaigns are just in a better position. And yes, I know there is a typo. I just realized it right there. Okay, moving on. The Queen and the Crone, sorry for the pause right there. Some of this text is very, very small. Queen and the Crone, 10th place. Like, just not great campaigns. Legendary Lords that can feel like lackluster. That's Reddit's opinion, not necessarily mine. I think Hellebron and Alariel kind of get a bit of a bad rap, especially Hellebron. Like, I really think Hellebron and Alariel are much better Legendary Lords than a lot of people give them credit for, but certainly the impression of a lot of people in the community is not particularly that great with these two Legendary Lords, and that is the reason. Shadows of Change, 11th spot. Yes, Shadows of Change, in the opinion of Reddit, is not as freaking bad as Grim in the Grave. I'm not sure I agree with that sentiment, but I don't think anyone needs to understand. Like, just really horrible DLC practices, horrible value, not great campaigns. Yeah, even if it's not last spot, as it should deserve, I'm like, this is where Get Reddit, I feel, got it really correct. Silence in the Fury. It's in 4th position. Personally, I'd rank it higher, but it actually was a bit of a discussion over there between that on this particular subject, like the last few positions, the last 3. People just, I feel like with this one, people just liked certain DLCs more than it on Reddit. I would rank it higher personally. Like, I'd certainly put the top 3, but Reddit put it in 4th place. So not a huge disagreement, but a bit of a disagreement all the same. The next one, Twisted and Twilight. Twisted and Twilight got 2nd position. Like, really great DLC, good amount of value, access to Skaven if you don't own Warhammer 2, access to the entire Wood Elf roster if you want to get the Wood Elves. Like, this is a really good DLC with 2 great Legendary Lords, great amount of value, good campaigns at the time. And while Wood Elves haven't necessarily aged well and Kislev sucks as a terrain area in the entire campaign, it's certainly one of the best DLCs in terms of like the value proposition. Perspective of Reddit, my perspective as well. So I think like that spot is not necessarily that bad. Thrones of Decay. Interesting discussion over here with Thrones of Decay. It got 3rd position. Now, from my perspective, Thrones of Decay is the best DLC CA has ever released. The reason Reddit voted it down, I honestly think it feels a bit silly. I really do think it feels a bit silly. Like, I can agree with Ticket Claw, but people are like, oh, it's buying power. To which I reply, you know how many campaigns I've used Thunder Barges? None. Like, outside of getting them in Malachi's campaign because they're free, I don't play even if when you can recruit Thunder Barges, they're just kind of not worth it because you can make Dwarf campaigns work with so many other units. And it's like, oh, but the Empire, I mean, Gelt is very powerful and he's available for free. So I'm not sure I buy the buying power argument. For Skaven, it is very substantial. For this, I don't know. I just don't see it personally. Maybe, some people can like me on that. Champions of Chaos 6th position. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I can't explain it really on that subject. You rate Shadow and Blade lower than this because the campaigns aren't great, and yet you rate Champions of Chaos in 6th position, even though Warriors of Chaos are a steamroll race. It certainly adds value, adds a lot of variety of units, does add a bunch of uniqueness and all that kind of stuff, but I would not say this is in 6th place. Like, I would rank Shadow and Blade higher. I would probably, like, I can understand why people voted the stuff lower. Like, the only disagreement here was with Shadow and Blade, really. Hunter and Beast, yeah, it's worse, but I would rank that lower. But not a huge disagreement besides that, but I certainly would consider Shadow and Blade better. And then finally, the number 1 spot. This was bizarre. Like, genuinely. Like, it just came down to the fact, like, some people didn't like the buying power aspect. And even with Twist and Twilight, they didn't like it. But Warden and the Punch? Number one best DLC in Total War Warhammer? Really, Reddit? I mean, okay. There's issues in Alfarian's campaign, there's issues in Grom's campaign and the way they work in Warhammer 3. And keep in mind that the way things were voted in the series of discussion and the polls that Reddit did was based on the value the DLC added at the moment. And you're telling me Warden Punch is the most valuable DLC? Like, there's nothing to be said on Warden and Punch because basically, Twisted on Twilight got eliminated. It was a process of elimination in favor of Warden and Punch. I can understand why people like Grom and Alfarian. Hell, I like Alfarian as a character. I wish his campaign was better, but the best DLC in the game? Really? The best freaking DLC? I could accept Twisted and Twilight. I can understand the argument for Thrones of Decay, but really? This one? Two campaigns that are kind of questionable a bit with annoying mechanics. Cauldron's not bad, but the climate situation Grom has is a bit... I mean, it is very useful for Greenskins because it gives you a replenishment hero, but everything else kind of redundant. And for High Elves, you do get an Archmage Lord, which is useful because you lack mages for a bunch of the early game. But best DLC? Really? I don't know. Make of this what you will. This is what Reddit voted for a process of elimination. Some of these things I agree with. Quite a few things I disagree. Where would I put this? Well, you already know my opinion. I certainly would have put Thrones of Decay Thrones of Decay higher. Honestly, I would put Silence and Fury above it. Like, my top 3 positions would be Thrones of Decay, Twist and Twilight, Silence and Fury, something along those lines, basically. I would rate Prophet and Warlock lower. I would rate Champions of Chaos lower. I would put Hunter and Beast a lot lower. And put Queen and the Crone higher. Because Queen and the Crone actually adds useful stuff. Like, adds Handmaiden's hero. Like, in terms of value proposition, Queen and Crone, might not have the most interesting campaigns in the world and can feel a bit outdated. But it actually adds very important stuff for both races. Make of this what you will. This is the wisdom of Reddit, or the Reddit meta. Costin signing out.